A husband left her struggling wife when her shop burned down. He didn't know she had just inherited $100 million. On the day her dress shop turned to ash, he pushed divorce papers into her shaking hands and left with her young worker. "You're a failure, Sarah. You mean nothing to me anymore. Sign these papers and go away." Those were the harsh words David spoke as her tears fell on the document. Instead of supporting her through hard times, he gave her shame. Instead of staying loyal, he chose to betray her. He believed she would stay broken, forgotten, buried under whispers of disgrace. But what he never knew was that the woman he threw away carried a secret. A fortune ready to lift her up, a gift that would not only rebuild her world, but also take away the pride he wore like armor. Sometimes the people you throw away become the ones you cannot forget. Sometimes the woman you call worthless becomes the name everyone celebrates. This is not just another story of betrayal. It is the voice of a heart left behind, the path of a soul crushed and remade, and the reminder that strength shines brightest after the darkest times. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting her voice fade into silence again. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman betrayed, every dream destroyed, and every survivor who chose to stand tall. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, share where you're watching from. Let Sarah know she is not alone. The dress shop door flew open, and Sarah stumbled inside carrying 3 heavy bags of cloth, her hands shaking from tiredness. It was past midnight, the street outside empty, but her lights still burned. Dust covered her face, and her once nice dress was marked with stains from hours of work. She had spent the whole day meeting suppliers, talking prices, and delivering finished dresses to customers herself. Yet when she walked into her small apartment upstairs, David, her husband, was lying lazily on the sofa, television flickering before his eyes, a glass of wine in his hand. He didn't even look up. Finally, he said, eyes stuck on the screen, "Took you forever. Did you bring the money?" His voice was sharp, not with care, but with demand. Sarah's heart dropped. She wanted to tell him how she had skipped meals to save money, how she had walked for miles because she couldn't afford transport, how her feet hurt from standing in the market all day. But she kept quiet. Instead, she placed a wrinkled envelope of cash on the table. David grabbed it without thanks, counting through the bills. "Not enough. How do you expect us to live like this? Look at me, Sarah. I should be a man with respect, not living off scraps from your little shop." Sarah held back tears, but her voice stayed steady. "I'm trying, David. The dress shop is growing. I just need more time. Every cent goes back into keeping it alive." From the corner, Lisa, their young worker, barely 22, with quiet eyes that seemed too watchful, stood arranging new cloth on the shelf. She watched silently, lips pressed tight, as Sarah's hard work was met with scorn. The neighbors outside whispered whenever they passed. "Sarah works herself to death while her husband enjoys himself," they would say. Some admired her strength, but most mocked the imbalance. "She doesn't know she's married to her own weight." Sarah ignored their voices. She believed love needed sacrifice. She believed her efforts would one day turn their lives around. Her dress shop was not just a business, it was her dream, her way of proving she could build something lasting. But as she watched David pour himself another drink with money she had earned, doubt crept into her heart like a shadow. Lisa broke the silence, her voice calm but edged with something Sarah didn't notice. "Don't worry, ma'am. Hard work never fails. One day you'll be rewarded." Sarah gave her a tired smile, grateful for the encouragement, never realizing Lisa's eyes stayed too long on David. That night, Sarah fell into bed, whispering a prayer for strength. She had no idea the storm was closer than she thought, and her sacrifices would soon be tested in ways she could never imagine. She believed her dress shop was unshakable, but before morning, fate would prove her wrong.
The night sky glowed red. Sarah jumped up from her bed as neighbors screamed in the street. When she threw open the window, her heart froze. Her dress shop was on fire. Flames ate through the wooden beams, swallowing the sign she had painted with her own hands. Sparks hissed into the air, and the smell of smoke filled her lungs. "Sarah! Sarah!" a neighbor shouted, banging on her door. "Your shop! Hurry!" Barefoot, she ran down the stairs, the ground burning beneath her steps. A small crowd had already gathered, some pointing in shock, others whispering. Water buckets were passed, but the fire was too strong, too fast. In seconds, her shelves, cloths, and years of hard work crumbled into ash. Sarah dropped to her knees, tears streaming. She reached out as if her hands could hold the falling beams, but they fell with a roar, forcing her back. Behind her, David appeared, not to comfort her, but to sigh with frustration. "Unbelievable. All my plans ruined because of your carelessness," he hissed, clutching his robe as if the smoke dirtied him. Sarah looked at him, trembling. "Our shop! It's gone, David! Everything is gone!" Instead of holding her, he spat on the ground. "Not ours, Sarah. Yours. I never asked you to waste your life in that little shop. Now look, nothing but debt and shame." His words cut sharper than the flames. Moments later, a stern voice broke through the chaos. Mr. Thompson, the local bank manager, marched toward them, his tall frame commanding silence. He had loaned Sarah money to expand the shop months ago. His face was tight with anger. "Sarah," he said firmly, ignoring the fire, "this is a disaster. Do you realize how much you still owe us? Your collateral won't cover it. You need to find a way to pay immediately." Sarah stammered. "Please, Mr. Thompson, give me time. I'll rebuild, I promise." But Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Hope does not pay debts. Banks need results, not promises. You have 1 week before legal action begins." The crowd murmured. Mrs. Peterson, Sarah's mother-in-law, stepped forward, her lips curled with disgust. "Didn't I warn you, David?" she said loud enough for all to hear. "This woman brings nothing but disgrace. She drags you down and you stand here like a fool defending her. Shame on you, both." David's jaw tightened, but instead of defending Sarah, he turned away. His silence spoke louder than words. He was already slipping from her side. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself as the fire hissed lower, leaving only blackened ruins. Her shop, her sweat, her sacrifices, gone in one cruel night. But worse than the fire was the shift she felt in the people around her. Their eyes no longer saw her as a fighter. They saw her as a failure. And in the corner, Lisa stood with folded arms, her gaze calm, almost too calm. Sarah thought the fire had destroyed enough, but the real flames, the ones inside her marriage, were only just beginning to burn. The slap echoed through the small apartment like a gunshot. David's palm had struck Sarah across the cheek, leaving her stunned and trembling. She clutched her face, staring at the man she once called her partner. "All this time," he spat, pacing the room, "I carried your shame. People laugh at me in the streets, Sarah. They whisper that I live off a failed woman. Do you think I'll let you drag me down forever?" Sarah's lips quivered. "I lost everything in the fire, David. I'm trying to hold us together. Can't you see that?" But his eyes were full of contempt. "Trying? You're nothing but a weight on my shoulders. I need a woman who lifts me, not one who buries me in ashes." The words pierced deeper than the blow. Sarah turned away, tears falling silently. She had given him her best years, her strength, her dreams. Now, in her weakest moment, he treated her as nothing. At that moment, Aunt Helen, Sarah's bitter aunt, arrived, her shrill voice as she entered. She had never liked Sarah and often favored David. "I told you, Sarah, this marriage was bound to fail. A man like David deserves better than a woman who can't even keep a business alive. You should be ashamed." Sarah's heart twisted. To be blamed by her own family was a wound she could hardly bear. Meanwhile, outside the apartment, neighbors gossiped loudly, their whispers carried through the thin walls. Poor Sarah, she tried too hard, but look at her now, nothing left, and her husband already slipping away. Some pitied her, but most mocked her. The same mouths that once praised her determination now laughed at her failure. Even her old customers, once loyal, drifted elsewhere. Her quality was good, but who trusts a woman who can't manage her own life? The betrayal stung, not in money, but in trust lost. In the shadows, Lisa moved quietly around the shop's ashes, offering Sarah soft words of encouragement, but her eyes often strayed towards David. She carried baskets of salvaged cloth as if helping, but her smile towards Sarah's husband lingered longer than it should. Sarah clung to hope, whispering to herself at night, "This storm will pass. He'll see I'm still the same woman he loved." But even as she prayed, she felt the distance growing. The warmth of love was turning into the cold silence of resentment. One evening, when she brought David his dinner, he shoved the plate away. "I don't want your pity food. Maybe I need a woman who knows how to succeed, not one who drags me into shame." His eyes flicked towards Lisa, and Sarah's heart sank with a new fear she dared not name. Sarah thought she was fighting only the fire's aftermath, but another fire, the ones burning in secrecy, was already consuming her home.
The kiss was sudden, stolen in the shadows of the ruined shop. David's lips brushed against Lisa's, his hand gripping her wrist. Sarah's trusted worker gasped, but instead of pulling away, she smiled faintly. "If Sarah finds out," Lisa whispered. David smirked, lowering his voice. "She won't. She's too blind with failure to notice anything. Besides, you're the only one who understands me now." That night, Sarah walked into the shop's burnt shell to find Lisa dusting charred shelves. The young woman greeted her warmly as if nothing had happened. "Don't lose hope, ma'am. You're stronger than this. I'll stay by your side no matter what." Her words dripped with loyalty, and Sarah, weary and broken, believed them. But Lisa's friend Rachel, bold and greedy, whispered poison into Lisa's ear whenever they met in the market. "Why waste time helping Sarah?" Rachel sneered. "David is a man with ambition. Stay close to him and you'll live a life of comfort. Forget loyalty. Loyalty doesn't buy silk dresses or fine wine." Lisa hesitated, torn between appearances of kindness and the lure of greed. Her eyes sparkled when she imagined the life Rachel promised. Meanwhile, David's old friend Marcus slapped him on the back in a local bar. Marcus was the kind who thrived on ego and arrogance, a man who lived for shallow victories. "Why chain yourself to a sinking ship?" he laughed, sipping his drink. "You've got youth on your side, money to make, women to chase. That wife of yours, she's dead weight. A man like you deserves better." David nodded, drinking in the flattery. Marcus's words ignited something dangerous inside him, the belief that leaving Sarah wasn't betrayal, but freedom. Back at home, Sarah worked late into the night, sketching plans for a new shop with trembling hands. She didn't see how David lingered longer by Lisa's side. She didn't hear the whispers exchanged behind her back. She still believed her sacrifices bound them together. "David," she said softly one evening, serving him dinner, "thank you for staying with me. I know things are hard, but I promise I'll rise again. I'll make you proud." He looked at her, silent for a moment, then forced a smile. "Of course, Sarah, I'll always stand by you." His words felt like comfort, but in his eyes there was no love, only calculation. Later that night, while Sarah wept quietly in her room, David and Lisa exchanged another secret glance. False loyalty had wrapped itself around Sarah's world like a snake, and she had no idea its fangs were already aimed at her heart. Sarah believed his promises, but the world would soon see those same promises ripped apart, not in whispers, but in the glare of public betrayal. The courtroom gasped as the papers slammed onto the wooden desk. David had thrown them with a smirk, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Sign them, Sarah. Today you stop embarrassing me as my wife." Sarah froze, her trembling hand hovering over the divorce documents. Her heart raced. She had not been warned, not even in whispers at home. To be summoned here in front of strangers, only to be humiliated by the man she once trusted, was a cruelty beyond words. The judge glanced at her with pity. Neighbors packed the benches, whispering as if they had come to watch a show. "She worked like a slave, and this is her reward," one murmured. Another replied, "Maybe she deserves it. A woman who can't keep her husband happy loses her place." And then, like salt on a fresh wound, Lisa walked in. Her steps were deliberate, her smile unapologetic. She slid into the seat beside David, her hand resting boldly on his arm. Gasps rippled across the room. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Lisa? You?" Her voice cracked. Lisa tilted her chin proudly. "Don't look so shocked, ma'am. Some of us know how to hold on to a man." Her words dripped with venom disguised as sweetness. David leaned back in his chair, enjoying the spectacle. "She's not just my new partner in life, Sarah. She'll help me rebuild everything you ruined. This is the woman I should have chosen from the start." Sarah's chest tightened. Every sacrifice, every late night, every tear for this man had been reduced to public ashes. In the back row, Mrs. Peterson, her mother-in-law, shook her head with approval. "Finally, my son sees sense," she muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Sarah was a curse to him from the beginning." Sarah's pen slipped from her grasp. She looked around, searching for a kind face, but all she found was whispers, mockery, and silence. Her dreams, her dignity, her marriage, all torn apart in one brutal act. Still, she steadied herself. "David," she said softly, her voice carrying more pain than anger. "You don't know what you're doing. Betrayal doesn't bring happiness. It only destroys." But David laughed bitterly. "What destroys is failure, Sarah, and you are failure itself." The judge cleared his throat, signaling the end of the session, but Sarah's world had already ended long before his gavel struck. She gathered the shredded remains of her courage and walked out, her steps heavy, her heart bleeding. Behind her, David kissed Lisa's cheek in front of the crowd, sealing the humiliation. The spectators erupted in whispers. The betrayal was no longer hidden, it was paraded like a crown.
Sarah thought the courtroom was the lowest point, but true isolation was waiting outside, a silence more painful than public shame. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a final sentence. Sarah staggered into her empty apartment, collapsing onto the floor. The silence pressed in, heavier than the courtroom whispers. Her chest heaved as sobs ripped through her body. For the first time in years, she was utterly alone. She curled into herself, hands clutching her arms as if to hold the pieces of her soul together. The betrayal in court, the mocking eyes of neighbors, Lisa's smug smile, it all replayed in her mind like knives cutting deeper with every memory. Suddenly, a knock rattled the door. Hope flickered for a moment. Maybe David had come back. Maybe it was all a mistake. But when she opened it, Aunt Helen stood there, her expression sharp and cold. "You brought this on yourself," Helen said without hesitation. "I warned you that David deserved better. Now look at you. No husband, no business, nothing. You're a disgrace to this family." Sarah's knees buckled, but she clung to the doorframe, whispering, "Aunt, please, not now." Helen scoffed and turned away. "Don't expect sympathy. You're alone because you chose to fail." Sarah sank to the floor, her tears blurring her vision. Hours later, the door creaked open gently. Thomas, her quiet cousin, stepped in. He was a man in his 30s, with kind eyes and a soft presence that always made Sarah feel safe. Without words, he knelt beside her, offering a handkerchief. "You don't deserve this," Thomas said softly. "I've watched you give everything, Sarah. Don't let his betrayal define you." Sarah clutched the handkerchief, her tears soaking it. "But Thomas, I have nothing left. How can I stand when everything has been taken?" He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You still have yourself, and you still have people who won't leave you." Moments later, Grace, her longtime caregiver and helper, entered with a bag of food. Her face was lined with age, but her heart was steady as stone.
She set the bag down and cupped Sarah's face in her rough hands. "Child," said Grace gently, "you've carried too much on your own. Cry if you must, but tomorrow you will rise. Pain is not the end, it is a beginning in disguise." Sarah's sobs slowed as the warmth of Thomas's loyalty and Grace's comfort surrounded her. Yet outside the window, the voices of neighbors still pierced the night. "Did you hear? She's still clinging to hope. Poor fool. David has moved on. She'll never recover. Some women are just born to be forgotten." The words sliced through the fragile peace inside, reminding Sarah that the world was already writing her off. She pulled the blanket over herself, her eyes red but open. Sleep would not come, only the ache of loss and the fear of tomorrow. And in the darkness, a thought whispered across her heart. What if they were right? Sarah believed despair had buried her, but a letter waiting in the shadows would soon ignite a spark she thought was lost forever. The envelope hit the table with a heavy thud. Miss Carter, a well-dressed lawyer in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence, looked straight at Sarah. "This arrived at my office weeks ago. It's addressed to you, from your late Uncle Richard." Sarah's hands shook as she reached for it. Uncle Richard had been distant, a man she hadn't seen in years. Why now? Why her? She tore it open, the paper inside trembling with her breath. "My dear Sarah," the letter began, "I know this may reach you in your darkest hour. I have watched from afar, silent but never uncaring. Life has tested you, and though you may feel broken, I see strength in you others do not. I leave you with more than wealth. I leave you with a chance to rise, to rebuild, and to shine again. But remember, this gift comes with a condition. Use it not for vengeance, but for good. Only then will it bear fruit." Tears blurred Sarah's eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest, her heart pounding. For the first time since the fire, something other than despair stirred inside her. A spark, fragile but alive. Thomas leaned closer, his voice gentle. "Sarah, this is more than money. This is hope." Grace, standing behind her, wiped a tear with the edge of her scarf. "Child, didn't I say pain is the beginning of something new? Your uncle saw what we see. You are stronger than this storm." Sarah's voice cracked. "But what if I fail again? What if I waste even this?" Miss Carter's gaze softened. "Then you rise again. This is not about failure, Sarah. It's about purpose. Your uncle believed in you. I do too." Pastor Samuel, the local faith elder who had come with Miss Carter, stepped forward quietly. His voice was low but steady, like a stream in the night. "Sarah, trials are not meant to destroy us. They are fires that refine us. This letter is not just about wealth. It is a reminder that you were never forgotten. You are chosen to be a light." Sarah gripped the paper tighter. For the first time, she felt a flicker of courage stirring through the ashes of her pain. Yet outside the neighbors' whispers grew louder. "Did you hear? She's still clinging to hope. Poor fool. David has moved on. She'll never recover. Some women are just born to be forgotten." Sarah closed her eyes, blocking out their voices. For the first time, she didn't crumble under them. For the first time, she stood. "I will not waste this gift," she whispered to herself, her voice steady now. "I will rise, not for vengeance, but for dignity." But as she folded the letter, Miss Carter added quietly, "Sarah, what you read is only the beginning. The full weight of your uncle's gift will change everything." Sarah's breath caught. The spark of courage flickered brighter, though she could not yet see the fire it was about to ignite. She thought the letter was hope enough, but the true inheritance and its secrecy would turn her life in ways she could not imagine.
The sound of the vault door unlocking echoed like thunder. Sarah stepped into the private office of Ms. Carter's law firm, her heart pounding.
On the polished mahogany desk lay a stack of sealed folders and documents thicker than any book she had ever held. Jennifer, Ms. Carter's young assistant, greeted her with a warm smile and guided her to the chair. "Mrs. Sarah," Jennifer said softly, her tone full of kindness, "everything you are about to hear is confidential. No one, not your husband, not your neighbors, not even your relatives, must know until you are ready." Sarah swallowed hard. She nodded, gripping the arms of the chair as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. Ms. Carter adjusted her glasses, her eyes steady. "Your uncle's letter was only a glimpse. Today I reveal the full truth. He left you an inheritance of $100 million. Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The number felt unreal, like a dream she dared not believe. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "$100 million? Yes," Ms. Carter confirmed. "Investments, properties, and trust accounts. He built a fortune, and he left it entirely to you. But remember, he left it with conditions. Use it to rebuild, to bless others, and never to seek revenge. That is the path he chose for you." Sarah covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. For months she had been crushed under debt, mocked by neighbors, and stripped of dignity in court. Now, in one moment, her world shifted. She was no longer powerless. Thomas, who had come to support her, leaned closer. "Sarah, this is your chance. You can start again, stronger, wiser, untouchable." Jennifer stepped forward with another folder. "These are the papers securing your inheritance in full. I will personally ensure all transactions remain private. No one will discover your wealth until you decide. You are safe with us." Sarah looked into Jennifer's kind eyes and saw something she hadn't felt in a long time: trust. She nodded firmly. "Thank you. I don't want revenge. I want to rebuild with dignity. My uncle will not be disappointed." Pastor Samuel, who had been invited to witness, clasped her hands gently. "This is more than fortune, Sarah. This is a calling. Wealth in the wrong hands destroys, but in yours it can heal. Never forget the power of compassion." Sarah wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and signed the final page. The ink felt like fire on paper, a new chapter burning into existence. As she closed the folder, Ms. Carter leaned back, her expression serious. "Sarah, I must warn you, wealth attracts shadows. People who abandoned you will try to return. You must be prepared." Sarah exhaled slowly, her resolve hardening. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Sarah thought secrecy would protect her, but the first shadow, her husband, was already plotting his way back into her life. The knock on Sarah's door was sharp, desperate. When she opened it, David stood there, his eyes swollen with fake tears, his suit wrinkled as though he had been suffering. Without waiting for permission, he pushed inside and dropped to his knees. "Sarah," he pleaded, grabbing her hands, "I made a mistake. I was blind. I let anger and pride destroy us. Please forgive me. Give me another chance." Sarah froze. The same man who had humiliated her in court now knelt at her feet. For a brief moment, her heart remembered the years they shared, but then the images of betrayal flooded back, his words, Lisa's smug smile, the sting of abandonment. She pulled her hands away slowly. "David, why now? Why come back after all you've done?" David forced a trembling smile. "Because I realized I cannot live without you. Lisa, she's not you. She doesn't understand me like you do. You're my wife, Sarah. We belong together." What he didn't know was that Sarah already carried her uncle's secret inheritance. She studied his face carefully, and for the first time, she saw not love, only calculation. At a distance, Lisa's voice cut through the silence. She had followed him, heels clicking against the pavement as she entered uninvited. Her eyes narrowed at Sarah, her words dripping with venom. "Don't be fooled, Sarah. He's here because he pities you, and maybe you should pity yourself, alone, abandoned, forgotten." But when David turned sharply and hissed, "Lisa, not now," Sarah caught the flicker of truth. This was not about love. This was about manipulation. Later that night, in the shadows of a bar, Marcus slapped David's back again, smirking. "You're playing the right game, my friend. If she still has anything left, money, family, sympathy, grab it. Don't let her slip away. A smart man always knows how to circle back to the nest." And Lisa, though bitter, whispered under her breath to David as they walked home, "You'd better get something out of her, otherwise you'll drag me down with your failures." Sarah, however, stood firm. When David visited again the next day, she didn't raise her voice or cry. She looked him in the eyes with calm strength. "David, you chose to throw me away. You don't get to walk back into my life as if nothing happened. My door is not open for betrayal twice." His face darkened, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He clenched his fist, but forced a smile, masking his anger. "You'll regret this, Sarah. No one turns me away." Sarah closed the door gently, her heart heavy but steady. For the first time, she was not begging him to stay. She was the one who ended the conversation. Sarah thought his games ended at her doorstep, but greed has a way of exposing itself, and soon the mask of wealth around David and Lisa would begin to crumble.
The necklace sparkled like fire under the sunlight as Lisa paraded through the market, her chin high, her laughter loud. She waved her hand so everyone could see the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "David knows how to take care of me," she boasted, tossing her hair. "Not like some women who end up with nothing but ashes." Rachel, her closest friend, walked beside her, fanning her with flattery. "You've risen, Lisa. Look at you now. Jewelry, dresses, respect. Stick with David and you'll never know poverty again." But whispers trailed behind them. Old customers and neighbors shook their heads. "All that money? Where does it come from? Didn't David abandon his wife in shame? He walks like a king, but his pockets look thin." Lisa ignored the whispers, basking in the illusion of wealth. But when she returned home, reality struck. Bills piled on the table. Creditors had called twice that morning. David sat slumped in a chair, sweat on his brow, staring at empty accounts. "David!" Lisa snapped, throwing her bag on the floor. "We can't keep living like this. Where's the money? You promised me comfort." David's voice cracked with anger. "Do you think fortune falls from the sky? I'm doing everything I can. I just need time." Marcus barged in without knocking, his grin careless. "My friend, you're losing control. The facade is slipping. Everyone's starting to whisper that you're drowning. You'd better fix it, or soon no one will respect you." David rubbed his temples, rage boiling under his skin. "It's Sarah's fault," he muttered bitterly. "If she hadn't failed, I wouldn't be here. She owes me. She still owes me." Lisa crossed her arms. "Stop blaming her. You wanted me, not her. If you can't provide, maybe I need to look elsewhere." The words cut through him like a blade, but he forced a laugh, masking his fear. "You wouldn't dare." Rachel, sensing the tension, smirked. "Lisa, don't waste your beauty on empty pockets. A woman like you deserves real wealth, not promises that crumble." Lisa's eyes darkened, and though she said nothing, the seed of betrayal was planted. Meanwhile, in the streets, old customers who once admired Sarah whispered about David. "He walks proud, but he's hollow. At least Sarah, even in failure, worked with honesty. He only rides on illusions." The community that once mocked Sarah now began to shift their gaze, not in pity, but in quiet recognition of the difference between resilience and arrogance. That evening, David stormed into his apartment, slamming the door. Lisa sat by the window, her necklace glinting in the dim light, her eyes cold. She no longer looked like a partner, she looked like a woman waiting for her chance to escape. And David, though still defiant, felt the first crack in the empire he thought he had built. Sarah didn't know it yet, but while greed was eating David alive, Lisa was already preparing the sharpest betrayal of all. The slap of a credit card against the waiter's tray rang through the restaurant. David reached into his pocket with shaking hands, but his wallet was empty. The waiter frowned. "Sir, your card has been declined." Gasps rippled through the crowded dining hall, heads turned, whispers spread. David's face flushed with shame. He slammed the useless card on the table, stammering, "Run it again!" But Lisa was already standing, her red dress shimmering under the chandeliers. With a sly smile, she slipped another man's black card into the waiter's hand. The man, a wealthy investor she had been secretly meeting, leaned back in his chair, his arms sliding around Lisa's waist as though she already belonged to him. The whispers grew louder. "Isn't that David's mistress with another man? So the rumors were true." David's jaw dropped. "Lisa, what are you doing?" Lisa's eyes turned cold, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm doing what you failed to do, David, choosing security. You thought I'd wait forever while you drown in debt. I need a man who can provide, not one who hides behind excuses." The room fell silent as the investor arose, placing a heavy hand on David's shoulder. "She's with me now. You should take your pride and leave before you embarrass yourself further." David's fist shook, rage boiling in his chest. "Lisa, after everything I gave you!" She laughed cruelly. "Everything? You gave me lies, empty pockets, false promises. You thought you were better than Sarah, but at least Sarah worked. You're nothing without women to carry you." Her words hit like hammers. The same lips that once whispered loyalty now tore him apart in front of strangers. Marcus, David's so-called friend, who had encouraged his arrogance for months, stepped back from the table, muttering, "I don't mix with losers." He left without a glance, abandoning him as quickly as he once cheered him. David stood frozen, humiliated, stripped of dignity. He could hear the whispers stabbing his pride. Abandoned by the mistress, just like he abandoned his wife. Lisa leaned closer, her perfume filling his lungs like poison. "You threw Sarah away, thinking you were winning. But now, David, you've lost everything, and this time no one will take you back." With that, she walked out arm in arm with her new man, leaving David alone at the table, eyes burning, pride shattered, pockets empty. The waiter placed the declined card back in front of him, and the entire hall erupted in quiet laughter. David sank into his chair, hands gripping his hair, realizing for the first time what betrayal tasted like. Sarah had no idea that while David sank into ruin, her true circle of loyalty was about to shine brighter than ever, starting with the smallest act of honesty from an unexpected hand.
The purse hit the dusty ground, spilling coins and papers across the busy street. Sarah gasped, bending quickly to gather them. But before her trembling hands could reach, a small figure darted in. A barefoot condal vendor, no older than 10, carrying a roasted peanuts on his head, knelt down and carefully picked up each coin. His little fingers placed everything back into the purse before offering it to her with a shy smile. "Ma'am, you dropped this," he said softly. Sarah blinked, stunned by the honesty. Many would have snatched the money and run, but this child, who clearly had so little, returned every coin. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, son. You don't know how much this means." The boy nodded humbly and slipped back into the crowd, his small frame disappearing, but leaving Sarah's heart stirred. That act of innocence felt like a seed of hope, proof that not everyone was cruel. Later that day, Thomas arrived at her door, carrying a bag of supplies.
He had been helping quietly, without fanfare, but now he placed the bag in front of her with a determined look. "Sarah, it's time you started again. You can't stay in these ashes forever. Let me help you rebuild." Sarah hesitated. "Thomas, I don't want to be a burden. You've done enough." But Thomas shook his head, his voice steady. "You're not a burden, you're family, and when family stands together, nothing is impossible." Grace, faithful as ever, stepped in from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "He's right, child. You can start small. Even ashes can be used to grow something new. Let us carry this with you." Sarah looked at the two of them, her cousin and her caregiver, and felt her heart swell. David had abandoned her, Lisa had betrayed her, her aunt had scorned her, but here stood people who refused to leave. Their loyalty was not loud, but it was real. That night, as she laid her head down, Sarah reflected on the day. The small boy's honesty, Thomas's quiet strength, Grace's steady comfort. These were treasures money could never buy. She whispered into the silence, "I may have been broken, but I am not alone." Yet outside, neighbors still whispered, though their tone was shifting. Some spoke in disbelief. She still tries to rise after all she's lost? Others murmured with cautious respect, "Maybe she has more strength than we thought." Sarah didn't know it, but her steps were already planting the roots of a new beginning. In the very next morning, she would take the boldest step since her world had fallen apart. Sarah thought loyalty was enough, but soon resilience itself would take shape, and her ashes would begin to glow with life again. The hammer struck wood, echoing through the small rented space Sarah had chosen. Dust rose in the air as workers nailed shelves together. The room was hot, crowded, and far from perfect, but to Sarah, it felt like life itself was returning. She stood in the doorway, watching the transformation with tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Thomas asked, carrying in a heavy box of fabric. Sweat glistened on his forehead, but his voice carried quiet strength. Sarah nodded firmly. "Yes, it doesn't have to be big, it just has to begin." Her first employees were not professionals, they were women who had been mocked as worthless. A widowed mother, a disabled vendor, a young girl once abandoned in the streets. Sarah welcomed them with open arms. "You are not broken," she told them on the first day. "Here, your hands will create beauty. Here, you will stand tall." The women cried, some clutching her hands, others simply bowing their heads in gratitude. For Sarah, it was more than business, it was dignity being reborn. Old customers, hearing whispers that Sarah was trying again, drifted back one by one. At first they came hesitantly, unsure if her strength could last, but when they saw her designs, carefully crafted from scraps and salvaged cloth, their hearts softened. "This is the same Sarah," someone said with a smile. "But stronger," another added. "Her clothes carry something new, hope." Pastor Samuel visited the small shop one afternoon, his gentle eyes shining. He stood before the workers and customers, raising his hands. "What rises from ashes is not just fabric or business, but light. Sarah, you are showing us that brokenness can still bless the world." Sarah bowed her head, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She no longer sought applause, she sought purpose. And slowly, the gossip of the neighborhood began to change. The whispers that once mocked her now carried wonder. "She is rising," they murmured. "Even after all she's lost, she stands again." But late that night, as Sarah closed the shop, she paused by the half-burnt sign she had saved from the ruins of her old shop. She leaned it against the wall, her hand brushing its scorched edges. It was a symbol of all she had endured and all she was becoming. In the distance, a shadow lingered, someone watching quietly as she locked the door. Sarah did not see it, but the eyes that glared at her held no joy, but only envy and greed. Sarah believed resilience was enough, but her generosity, the very heart of her uncle's wish, was about to change her path forever.
The hall exploded with camera flashes as Sarah stepped onto the grand stage of the city hall. The crowd surged forward, chanting her name. Mothers she had fed held their children high. Vendors raised their baskets, and donors clapped until their palms burned. Rebecca, the journalist, stood at the podium, her voice echoing with power. Once mocked, once abandoned, once humiliated in court, Sarah has risen. From ashes, she built a new dawn for us all. She is not just a survivor, she is a leader. The applause shook the hall. Sarah stood in a simple black dress, her posture calm yet unshakable. She lifted her hand, and the hall grew quiet. "I was betrayed," she began, her voice steady. "But betrayal did not end me. I was broken, but brokenness became my teacher. Today I stand not because of wealth, but because of grace. Grace to rise, grace to forgive, grace to give." The crowd roared, their cheers rising like thunder. Tears streamed down cheeks. Suddenly, a figure stumbled forward from the crowd. Gasps filled the hall. It was David. His once proud suit was torn, his face hollow with shame, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He collapsed to his knees before her. "Sarah," he sobbed, his voice breaking. "Please forgive me. I was a fool. Lisa betrayed me, my friends abandoned me, and I have nothing left. I was blind, blind to your worth. Take me back." The hall went silent, every ear straining for her reply. Sarah's chest tightened, memories rushing back. The fire, the courtroom, the insults, the loneliness. She bent slightly, her face gentle but firm. "David, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to let bitterness poison me. But you cannot return. My life is no longer yours to destroy." David clutched at her dress, begging, "Sarah, please." She stepped back, her voice calm but final. "You chose pride over love, betrayal over loyalty. Now you must live with what you chose." The applause erupted in cheers louder than before. Beneficiaries wept openly, neighbors clapped, and even Rebecca wiped her eyes as she scribbled her final headline: "Forgiveness with dignity, the woman who chose grace over revenge." At the foundation's entrance, workers unveiled the charred sign Sarah had saved from her burnt shop. Its blackened edges glistened under the lights, a symbol of pain reborn into purpose. Sarah touched it gently, then turned to the crowd. "This is our new beginning." The cheers rose again, thunder shaking the roof, echoing into the streets. Sarah stood tall, not as the broken woman David once spat on, but as a beacon no shadow could ever silence again. Sarah thought the triumph ended on stage, but the truest victory was still ahead, the quiet legacy of generosity that would outlive even her own story. The morning sun lit up the community hall like gold. Trucks lined the street outside, filled with bags of rice, boxes of fabric, and crates of food. Crowds pressed forward, not to whisper or mock as they once had, but to receive with gratitude. Sarah stood at the doorway, her hands steady as she welcomed each family. Mothers clutched her hands with tears in their eyes. Fathers bowed in respect. Children hugged her legs with innocent joy. One young widow cried openly as Sarah placed a basket in her arms. "I thought no one remembered us, but you came." Sarah smiled gently. "You are not forgotten. None of you are." Inside, workers, many of them the same marginalized women Sarah had hired, sorted supplies with laughter and dignity. What had once been broken lives were now the heartbeat of her foundation. Grace moved among them, her steady hands guiding and comforting. Thomas carried heavy crates, his quiet loyalty as present as the air itself. And in the corner, Rebecca scribbled furiously into her notebook, her eyes shining. She had written scandals before, but this story was different. It was not about shame, it was about light. "The woman who forgave and the woman who gave back," Rebecca whispered to herself. Donors, stirred by Sarah's humility, began to pledge support. Men and women of wealth stood in line, not to be praised, but to join her mission.
The foundation was no longer just Sarah's dream, it was becoming a movement. As the hall emptied, Sarah sat on a wooden bench, her eyes scanning the faces around her. She remembered the fire, the courtroom, the betrayal. She remembered the night she cried herself to sleep, thinking she was alone. Now, in place of silence, there was laughter. In place of shame, there was honor. In place of betrayal, there was loyalty. Thomas sat beside her, watching the children play outside. "You did it, Sarah. You turned pain into something beautiful." Sarah shook her head gently. "Not me alone. My uncle believed in me. You stood by me. Grace carried me. Strangers reminded me of honesty. All I did was choose to rise." She looked toward the sign of her old shop, now hanging proudly at the foundation's entrance. The charred wood glistened in the sunlight, a symbol of ashes turned into life. Sarah whispered, almost to herself, "This is not revenge. This is rebirth." As the wind brushed her face, children's laughter echoing in the distance, Sarah knew her journey was far from over. But this chapter, the one born in betrayal, had closed in victory. She stood, her voice steady, her heart full. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. What began as a story of betrayal had become a story of legacy, a reminder that true power lies not in revenge, but in the courage to rebuild and give.